Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Before we get started, I'd like to give a few housekeeping updates. The audience will be muted from now, and we will also start the recording. If you have any questions while the webinar is being held, please place them in the IM window located in the left-hand bottom corner, and we will resume to the questions once the presenter has finished speaking. Thank you. AJ, go ahead and take it over.
Hello, everyone. This is AJ Shortledge, and I am a consultant with New Signature. I've been here for 2 years now and have been overseeing our Yammer implementation and enablement program. And I also have my colleague Eric Hope with me.
Hello, everyone.
And Eric has been with New Signature for
just over 9 months.
And today we will be presenting on how to harness the power of employee engagement. And we will be primarily focusing on Yammer as the platform to do so. So we will jump right in. And everybody should see the presentation now. So if you don't, please feel free to just write in the IM window, and we can assist from there.
All right.
You should see the presentation move forward to the next slide. So today we will be discussing what the benefits of employee engagement are, how to overcome fear of enterprise social, and what it takes to be successful with enterprise social. So, as mentioned, what are the benefits of employee engagement?
So there are 3 types of engaged employee. There's the actively disengaged.
Sorry about that. There we go. So what are the 3 types of employees?
Right. So we have actively disengaged, we have a non-engaged employee, and we have actively engaged. So to run through some ideas about what type of person an actively disengaged individual would be, if somebody named Bob comes into work, he's incredibly unhappy, he's miserable, he actively complains about his job to staff and to his friends across various social media methods. He's frequently absent from work, he monopolizes management time, he undermines coworkers, either by not responding to emails, sabotaging projects. He's basically just an unhappy person who's constantly looking for greener pastures. The next kind of engaged employee is a non-engaged. And it's basically somebody who is unenthusiastic, works her job, comes in, does an okay job, doesn't do anything particularly bad, but also doesn't do anything particularly outstanding. She blends in, doesn't have a lot of motivation to go really beyond what her own job description was. By doing this, she has this attitude of not really caring in terms of customer retention or providing an exemplary customer experience. By doing these things, even unintentionally, she's sabotaging not only her own, but the company's success as well. And finally, we have actively engaged staff. Pete and Micah, they are frequently collaborating on projects. And this is cross sort of departmental boundaries, whether they're working on these projects together or not. They are frequently bouncing ideas off each other, actively engaged with one another and with other coworkers, because they have this sense of ownership, not only in their own jobs, but in the company's success. They're committed to what they do, and regardless of what the task is, they are always willing to lend a helping hand.
So we have, what are the advantages of an actively engaged employee, similar to Pete and Micah? As you can see, employee engagement affects key business outcomes. This is a little small, but just to kind of go over it. In a 2012 Gallup meta-analysis showed that engaged employees outperform other companies by 10% in customer ratings, 21% in productivity, and 22% in profitability. Engaged employees typically have lower absenteeism and lower turnover rate. As you can see, they're 18% higher productivity and 51% lower in turnover rate. And you can improve your employee retention by engaging your employees. Gallup also estimates that active disengaged employees cost the U.S. between $450 to $550 billion per year in loss of revenue from impacted employees. So all of these are great, and you see a lot about enterprise social, but why are people not using it, and why are they afraid? Some of the common hesitations and complaints that we hear during implementation, both internally when we rolled out Yammer and with customers that we've rolled them out, is it's one more thing to look at or respond to. I don't want everyone to know what I'm working on. There's this fear of broadcasting what you're doing in this work out loud atmosphere that is very, very fearful and makes a lot of people have hesitation. Why do we need social in business? Business is business. Why do we need to talk to other people and interact with them on a social level? And then we've tried this in the past and it didn't work. That's another commonly heard item. If you're using Yammer free version right now, it may not have taken off. There's this idea that if you try something once and it doesn't work, you shouldn't try it again.
Right, and I found that people oftentimes they confuse social interaction with their colleagues and social enterprise. So we're not necessarily trying to confuse between the two, because you are interacting on a social level, but it's also on a business level. You are engaging your colleagues cross-departmental. You are sharing knowledge. You are sharing access to resources that they might not have in their own particular workflow.
Great. So how do you overcome the fear of social, or this idea of working out loud? You need to be proactive, prepared, and positive. There are many recommendations on how to approach all three of those, but primarily you want to have a discussion. You want to have a discussion internally. You want to have a discussion with the stakeholders, the C-suite, the staff. Explain what the benefits and how it will help transform your culture. You want to be transparent during the launch. You want to say when things are working and when they aren't. You want to have that ability to actually take a step back and say, this may not be working right. Let's try something different. Or this is working great. We're going to keep doing that. And because you know your company's culture best, you'll have a better idea of what hesitations will arise. Using that, you can anticipate the hesitation. Maybe you know a lot of people will be fearful of having to say everything that they're doing all of the time on the network. Maybe you adapt and say, just share one or two projects or an update about something that you're doing. And then, as we mentioned, know your corporate culture, know what your end goal is, or what kind of a community you want to have and what you want to see happen.
Mm-hmm. And by knowing your corporate culture, you can easily anticipate what sort of pushback you might see. And by doing this, you can actually be very proactive in terms of addressing people's concerns first and foremost, rather than have a more reactive approach where someone has this issue and suddenly you're at a loss and you're not quite sure how to address. So if we can maintain that sort of positive approach, be proactive, you can actually perform an implementation and have a very successful experience with it. And by doing so, really, really engage staff.
So there's this idea that when you do something new, it's primarily on the technology side. In this case, Enterprise Social is actually implemented 80% through culture and 20% through technology. You're looking at the culture being what you're doing now and what you're trying to achieve, and the technology is just the platform that you pick. It's this idea of balancing your culture and your IT department or the platform in order to get to the end result.
Right. I mean, your corporate culture can be defined as your approach to businesses and labor practices, your standards, right? Your top-down driven standards that management sets for you. It's not necessarily going to be a hard measurement of assets or revenues, profits, shareholder return, or anything that's sort of tangible. It's how your staff interacts with the rest of, not only themselves, but with the rest of the public.
Right, their company, their clients. And then Gartner also estimated that 80% of social business efforts will not achieve the intended benefits due to inadequate leadership and an overemphasis on technology. So it is important to remember that social enterprise isn't technology driven, it's culture driven. You need to have a particular culture in mind, and with this, HR is vital in the adoption and the implementation of any sort of social platform, regardless of what you choose. You're essentially the backbone of ensuring that it works and it's successful. So you see this number of 80% of social business efforts will not achieve the intended benefits, or this huge percentage of ventures with social that just never fully take off or never achieve success. Why is that? Why aren't companies achieving that success? We've come up with 6 steps for success with enterprise social. We do have an infographic for this that will be sent out to you after that can show you the roadmap and what to do and keep in mind, but we wanted to go over these today as well. So the very first one is to actually define your vision. This is incredibly important. You need to know how Yammer will help your organization or any enterprise social platform that you choose. You need to know what social platforms can, or how they can help your team work smarter, not harder. Brainstorm across the business to determine how to best utilize enterprise social applications for your staff. You need to come up with a plan, and you need to come up with your vision before you even try to implement it. If you try to implement something without a plan, you won't find success, unfortunately. That being said, if you do implement without a plan, you can always go back and create one after, if that's what you're experiencing now.
So the next step is to plan, basically. To develop business-focused use cases that help achieve higher engagement and collaboration. You need to prioritize your goals. You need to review the implementation plan. And you need to get it into action.
So that the business-focused use case, and this is where organic versus kind of forced adoption happens.
Right.
Your initial implementation will be a little bit more forced, and you'll come up with use cases. Perhaps it's increasing onboarding with your employees. You want to give them a smaller ramp-up window. You're trying to come up with a way of getting them immersed into the culture and ready to do their jobs faster. If you create an internal group for them, they can go in there, ask questions, find out who has expertise. They can ramp up faster. You're forcing them to use the platform. Whereas as that happens, and you'll see in the next steps, it'll start to happen a little bit more organically.
Right. So, I mean, for example, if you wanted to implement, one of the first things you wanted to do is implement onboarding procedures across Yammer. So then you could have all of your benefits documentation, any sort of onboarding videos, training videos, any sort of paperwork that needs to be filled out can all be housed within Yammer, so that way the first thing that a new employee does is they go into Yammer, they become engaged immediately because they have to start interacting with it and interacting with people in HR or in their own line of business management or their own colleagues. So that's, at the very least, that's one sort of immediate forced implementation use case.
Right, and as Eric just mentioned, implement is the third step. So you take those business use cases and you bring them to life. You bring the network to life. You invite and welcome new users. You encourage them to add photos, expertise, and start posting. If you've used Yammer or any platform for social enterprise, you'll typically see that there's an image option. You want to interact with people. You don't want to interact with unknown avatars because that just removes that social component, that personal component. And as mentioned, you want to drive forward those use cases that you came up with in the planning stage.
The next step is to engage. So this is where you really start seeing employees use your social enterprise through various groups, either social or line of business groups, through team groups, through project groups, through one-to-many conversations that you can have. Rather than going across email, you can actually have an entire conversation that's all in one thread, and you don't have anything getting branched off where someone replies to one person but doesn't reply all. That way, every person involved in that conversation stays actively engaged in it. You can do the same thing when working on projects. You can have various things that tie into your social enterprise platform, SharePoint, anything, projects where you can do multiple person collaboration simultaneously, where everyone is engaged and everyone is utilizing the technology that's there. They're being very social. They can throw out an idea and either implement it immediately or discuss why it won't work. There's plenty of ways to get people engaged, and this is goes back to what AJ was talking about in terms of organic growth. At this point, you're no longer doing a forced adoption where you're requiring people to interact with it. At this point, people are automatically going into their social enterprise and working across teams and collaborating with each other.
And this is also where you would implement Yammer into your line of business applications. So you would pull the open API and embed it into Salesforce or open it up in CRM. You have those options.
SharePoint, OneDrive for Business.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Or any third-party application as well.
Right.
Yammer's API is open, so you can do that. And I believe some of the other platforms work in a similar fashion as well. So your next step would actually be to measure. You want to review the analytics of user engagement. A lot of the tools, Yammer specifically, have this focused area where you can actually go in and see how user engagement is working. You want to see how many users have logged in, what groups are active, who's posting the most, who's liking the most. Those are very important during your launch because you want something tangible. You want something that you can show to a C-suite, or internally you can say, we have X number of employees that are engaged. Those are great numbers to boast during recruitment. You also want to refine your current use cases and adjust what isn't working. As previously mentioned, you want to be transparent. This is a journey. It's not a race. You're not going to get to an end goal of every single person using it and using it for X, Y, or Z. You're going to have to make adjustments along the way. Then finally,
we need to evaluate what AJ was just talking about. We take a look at the data. We measure the analytics. We take a look at what's working, and by doing so, we're able to adapt what wasn't working, and we make changes to it. Like AJ said, it's a journey. It's not something that's going to be that you're going to implement right away and have it just take off. It's a journey. You're constantly adapting. You're constantly working to make it to make those adjustments to work within your own corporate culture. You drive community management. You do this through the use of power users, people who are actively engaged, that see the benefits of enterprise social. You do this through community managers, people whose job is to make sure that your enterprise social platform is staying on target. It's staying on point. It's not sort of diverging into uses that aren't necessarily corporate focused. People whose job is to run the analytics. People, the community managers, they basically manage the enterprise social platform as a whole. And like AJ said, we can integrate Yammer because the API is open. Something like Yammer can easily be, integrated into something like Salesforce or Microsoft CRM, SharePoint. Do they have Box.com? I don't remember.
They do.
So other data repositories like Box or Dropbox or OneDrive for Business.
You want to make it easily accessible for your employees because you will get higher engagement numbers on something that people can use and have access to. One of the fears is to not want to add something else to your workflow. In this case, you are adding the open API into something people are already using.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't add anything else to your workflow. It's not a separate window to log into. And then, as mentioned before, you want to remember that you control the destination of your social journey. You are able to make changes.
We do have recommended steps that we follow, as we just went through there, the 6 steps. Looking at where you want to end up. What's your destination? Where do you want to be? Then you want to plan. You want to figure out how you're going to get there. Then you implement it. You get staff engaged. You start to measure that engagement, and finally you evaluate those measurements and you adapt to what's working and what isn't working. A lot of the C-suite staff, the executive, top level guys are going to be looking at those numbers, and once you show them that it's working and you show them how it's working and why it's working, you can easily get them engaged. And once the company, the corporate staff, sees that their executives are engaged, they'll be more inclined to become engaged as well. You need internal evangelists, power users, community managers. These are all, key ingredients to these steps to making the social enterprise and this journey successful.
Right. And you can get the executive buy-in and the internal evangelism by having discussions before you do a launch, and to quell those fears that people have. So these are the references that we used. If you do want to use any of those statistics or numbers, they're pretty useful and powerful, I think. And we are at the end. So if there are any questions, we're happy to address them now.
We don't have any questions, so thank you, AJ, and for joining us. And thank you all for joining us, too. We will be sending out a copy of the webinar through email after this and uploading it to our YouTube page, so please come and visit. Thank you.